Hi everyone, welcome back to Present Pilgrimage. I'm Jennifer and I'm here with Iyabo.
Hi, this is Iyabo.
For this podcast, we wanted to delve into kind of survival, self-care techniques, exercises, things that we can do to take care of ourselves in these times when we're feeling powerless and overwhelmed, particularly with what's going on in the world right now. There are people who've been feeling this way for a while related to what's happening, and we're now a year and a half into this presidency. There's so much going on. We turn on the news and there's something else that's happened around the world. There's more chaos. There's more destruction. There's more heartache. There's more tragedy. And lots of us get triggered in different ways to feeling hopeless, to feeling powerless, to feeling no matter what we're trying to do to counteract our current president's actions or his administration, that it's not helping. And that's where we want to talk about practices that we can incorporate in our lives and with others to help on a daily, continual basis to counteract that feeling, and that we can use in the future. So with self-care, Iyabo and I were talking about what makes us feel good, what things we can do for ourselves to maintain hope, inspiration, strength, to feel positive, to feel productive. And yeah, but why don't you talk about some things that you came across or that you've really understood that have helped you during these times?
Well, one of the things I want to first start out with is to revisit this word, self-care. It is so overused. It is so commonplace. We've made it trite. You know, a lot of people think getting my nails done is self-care, or having 3 glasses of wine is self-care at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And that's not what we're talking about. So my invitation to you is to revisit this word self-care. And at the center of self-care is it's care, but it's also responsibility. You are responsible for your own life. Nobody can take care of you. Really, nobody can. It would be nice if Knight in Shining Armor shows up and says, Shazam, all your problems are solved. Mm. But I don't believe we're designed for that. I think responsibility towards yourself is a lovely relationship of falling in love with yourself and saying, I matter, I care for me, I am equipped and I have the resources to be loving to myself. And when I say resources, your resource may be as simple as getting up and going out for a walk. Mm-hmm. Your resource may be as simple as picking up the phone to call somebody and say, I just need a shoulder to cry on, or I just wanted to hear your voice. Your resource may be an act of vulnerability to be more in touch with yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's not that it costs money. It's not that Prada handbag, if it's that, or a new pair of shoes, or spending money, or buying a fancy car, or whatever all of those things are. I want us to challenge ourselves to really seek the kind of care, self-care, where we're in charge of taking care of ourselves, being responsible to ourselves, and not necessarily using money. So, for instance, massage is a form of self-care. Now that costs money. But the reason to someone like me that massage would be important is that I think of the 5 love languages. And Jennifer, you're a therapist. Both you and I are in the caring world, right? You're a therapist. I'm a coach. I think of the 5 love languages, which is more of a pop psychology type of thing. But over the years, I've found it very helpful. This Gary Chapman, is that his name? And he talks, there's touch, there's words of affirmation, there's acts of service, there's gifts and quality time. Yeah. Now I need all of them, all 5.
They're all nice.
They're all nice. And according to Gary Chapman, out of these 5, like most people have two that they need, and that really feeds them. It's good to practice all of them, but to know it's for relationship building. So it's good to know what your partner likes, so that you can always feed them through that way, right? So I am a wordsmith, and I love finding amazing, unique compliments to give people. But here's the thing, I tend not to do that to my own self. And you know that ticker tape that runs in the back of your head of your self-language, your self-talk.
Yeah,
it doesn't have those...
that critical voice.
Yeah, that critical voice.
Yeah.
Self-care helps you shut off that critical voice.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly good at using good language like that on myself, but that's part of my challenge with this particular podcast, to begin to use some of the unique ways I talk to other people, to use that on my own self, right? And touch, massage it's something I'm seeking now, because touch is so important to me. I'm a single woman. I don't have kids. I don't have a pet. When I had a pet, I would come home, sit down, and my cat would jump on my lap, and that was good for me.
Yeah.
When I was in seminary, I would go to my neighbor's house and sit with her big dog, Tigger. And Tigger would just lay his head on me, and it gave me so much joy. Yeah. And then also in seminary, we're so lovey-dovey. We were always hugging each other, that the presence of physical touch in my life was important. So now, these days, I don't get as much physical touch, but that's why I go looking for massages. But quality time is also important. This podcast is a way Jennifer and I get to spend quality time together, and I think that's important. We're friends, and it builds the relationship.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned the massages, but there are other ways to, we can get creative about getting our needs met, and maybe trading services.
Yes.
Or, really just kind of looking at something, other possibilities than your familiar way of going about your day. Looking for friends who support you in a different way, reaching out to people who have a similar interest, or, again, if it's whatever, if it's political, social interest, creative, and just taking that little bit of time, because it is something you can do for yourself, that you can build those relationships that will support you and not feel like you're stuck and you just have to kind of wait until things get better, or finding those friends, creating a circle of friends that will be there for you regardless, and in an unconditional way. Letting go of constraints and judgments about yourself, your life, what you need to be doing, how much, I don't know, just for myself, how much money I need to make, or where, how I should be sort of in a society that right now I'm not really sure where things are going. But what are the core values? What matters to you in your life, and how you can support those things that really matter, which again, we're going back to self-care, which is, knowing what your basic needs are, having an unconditional support system around you, a circle, doing fun, creative stuff, having some kind of fun, creative activity or outlet. Those are all important. They're not frivolous. They're not non-productive. They're not irrelevant. I think they're even more relevant than ever.
I know I write, and even if it's just as simple as writing in my journal, that's a profound act of self-care. My words matter. There we go, going back to words again. You were at a retreat. You conducted a retreat recently. I was on vacation in Western Massachusetts in the Berkshires.
Writing and self-care.
Writing and self-care.
And it was beautiful. And part of it was that the conditions around people sharing their writing, they're given a prompt and you write freely. You don't censor yourself. And then part of being in that circle and sharing is that people do not criticize. They refer to the writer as the author and not directly. They don't challenge. And they just make observations. And it's always positive, positive, positive. And people might be like, well, is that realistic? But the goal is not to, kind of fact check or to the goal is to encourage an unconditional atmosphere, because sometimes when we are unsure or we become vulnerable, those parts of us that we're afraid of sharing, we don't want to be exposed and just to be shut down again because there's maybe some unsureness about what we want to share, or judgment, fear of judgment.
Well, you know what's intriguing to me, Jennifer, as we flesh this out, is I think a lot of people think of self-care as spoiling themselves, making themselves
Especially
this priority
women.
and spoiling myself, buying something expensive or something.
It's a luxury. It's
a luxury.
essential.
There's a lux to it, right? But what I'm hearing and what I'm thinking about and when I reflect back over what I felt so good about that I've done for myself that replenished me and gave me life and made me feel hopeful again, those things required me to be more vulnerable.
Yeah.
One, to make the ask for to get in touch with what is it I really need right now.
Yes.
Two, to make the ask that, hey, I need this.
Yeah.
To value the needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other aspect of it is how it expands me, right? It doesn't just, it's not that you live your life at 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, and you go do something that brings you back to a 7. It's something that really takes you to an 8 or a 9, right? Mm-hmm. So let me share with you, on April 22nd, 2018, Alice Walker was at Agnes Scott, and I got tickets. And oh my God, these notes I took in this cute little cat notebook, I have come back to them so many times since April. So let me tell you what Alice Walker says, that there are two things. So the first one is, she says, there is in each of us light and darkness, peace and war, confusion and clarity. We carry both, and we need to be able to look deeper at the darkness. And we have to own our shadow. And I think that what happens, and you're the therapist, so you tell me if I'm wrong, right? I think what happens is when we come up against darkness in the world, and for me, things that make me feel hopeless, or trigger the well of hopelessness that's in me. It's like the well of hopelessness is in there, and then stuff happens and the lid comes off of it, right? And then the darkness is let out, or the hopelessness is let out. When things happen like that, I feel so overwhelmed by that darkness, by that shadow side. And I think what's happening, these external events are triggering internal events of old stuff that we've just schlepped stuff on, slacked stuff on, and kept on moving because we don't have a society that allows us
validate
to
and talk about it a safe way.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, let me give you an example. When my mother died, my father died in Nigeria. It took us, I think, 5 weeks to bury him. I went home after 1 week. There was a bunch of stuff I wanted to do in Nigeria. We went through all these logistics. We had 2 or 3 day funeral, which is very normal. Like my brother was opposed to it. My mother said, she was in Boston then, she said to her son, her precious, precious son, my brother, sweetheart, you don't seem to understand. Your father was a big man. You can't get away with just throwing him in the ground and being done with it. So we had a few cremation service. We had a big event party, all this stuff, right? And then when my mother died, which was 5 years later, in Boston in 2007, literally, she called, she was sick, she was going to the hospital. It was Friday. Saturday morning, I flew to Boston. She had a small procedure. She was not doing well. She lapsed into a coma. She died, I don't know, maybe Sunday. Monday, by Tuesday, we had organized a service and had her cremated, and her body was in the ground. By Thursday, her ashes were in the ground. By Thursday, I was back at work. A week, boom. And it was months, and I was having this swell of emotion that would just, it's one of those things. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just be like, oh my God, I want my mommy. And
the grief,
but we don't give time. Like, all my Nigerian friends were like, wow, you people, you white people, you really bury your people quick. How are you dealing with grief? Yeah. I'm like, huh? That's what you do in America. You can't afford to languish in grief for weeks and months.
It's not okay to feel grief about losing someone or losing something, or going through a transition in your life where you feel like there's a loss,
or a divorce, or a miscarriage, or trauma, or a car accident, or anything. You're just not allowed. You're supposed to have this bounce back that picks you right back up and, hey, I'm strong, I'm powerful, and I keep on moving. And I think that part of the process of self-care is to allow the dialogue between your highest and best self and your shadow side. And I think what Alice Walker is saying here, to own your shadow, it takes time. It's a process. And going to get your nails is not going to fix it. Mm-hmm. If you don't deal with your shadow side, you get sick. You get angry.
You project onto
others. Mm-hmm. You become narcissistic, like certain people we know.
Yeah.
So we need to be models and examples to one another of what good self-care looks like. Mm-hmm. Asking for what you want. Now, at this same event with Alice Walker, let me tell you this. Someone asked her, what does her self-care look like? And what I love about what she said, her form of self-care is to engage in travel. She says when you go to other places where people are at peace with their culture, it leads to a kind of deep comfort with being human. Mm. Is that not amazing?
I love that.
I love the mirroring aspect of it, where you go somewhere and you see it and somehow it becomes part of you.
And I love how, because you and I talk about, we've lived in other parts of the world and societies that have been around a long, long time. And there's a beautiful thing, and I'll never forget, like, traveling to Egypt and Africa and feeling this just deep comfort and peace about being with people who value everyday human life and interaction and make it an important part of their culture. And I feel like in the U.S., we kind of don't value that enough. And just the simplicity of inviting people into your home, making them a cup of tea, having a conversation with them. We don't have time for that. Like, Americans, but you go to Egypt, you go to Nigeria, you're going to have people passing through your house all day. And you're always expected to offer them something and to make time for them.
And also, I think of, in their latter years, My mother lived in Nigeria for 30-umpteen years. No, none of us quite remembers. Mm-hmm. And so 30 plus years. And then there was an incident of violence in her home where we were broken into, and she just was like, I didn't come to this country to die. Mm. And so she moved to America, started from scratch again. And my father was mad. He was like, your mother left me. And then finally he started coming here and spending much more time here. And he would go back home, and then at some point he had an illness. And we were like, Daddy, why are you going back home all the time? Mm. We want you to stay here. And he was like, no, I'm just another nobody in this country. And because when he goes home, if he just walks down the street, a man of his station in life,
people know who he is.
People just know. I mean, just his carriage communicates that he's an educated man, an elder in the community, a man of wisdom. His walk, his gait of confidence, and also just those that already know him, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's at home. People are greeting him, respecting his eldership, and it fed his soul. It was a form of self-care. Yeah. And just like as much as my mom's form of self-care was to come back to this country where she had safety and predictability, his form of self-care was to be to feel reflected in the eyes of the people and recognized as part of that community, because respect was how his self-care shows up. So I think it's important that A, self-care is different for each person. B, we have to be vulnerable to be in touch with our own selves to know what it is that we need.
Yes.
But I also want to know what else you want to add to that, Jennifer, because you're the pro here.
Well, we've been talking about humor a lot and the role that can play where things just seem challenging or upsetting or make you angry or you feel hopeless, and being able to laugh at the absurdity of politics sometimes, the absurdity of people who, want to play this game or the game of power, and just the absurdity of life. And there's a beautiful release in that, and being able to laugh at something that seems so scary or so threatening or so overwhelming or destructive, and just, that's for me, that's empowering in itself. And to know that, the world's not going to end. I don't know. We don't know, but we will wait. We will close our eyes and wake up tomorrow, and we will be us. And whatever's going on around us, sometimes we don't have complete control over that, but we do have control over certain things. And sometimes laughing at that can kind of be a way of resistance. That would be the one thing that I would add.
Absolutely. Well, let us know what you think about self-care. Send us an email at presentpilgrimage@gmail.com, and we'd love to get your responses.
Or on our Facebook page.
Or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/presentpilgrimage. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.